Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's video, I want to have a look at Litecoin. Now, I have a few interesting points to show you today with Litecoin. It's a coin that I'm not bullish on, but in a way I am bullish because it's sort of achieving a goal that I think was probably the original intention for cryptos like this, for Bitcoin. Like, these values now have become sort of a very hyped commodity. Like Bitcoin, you buy in to hope that it goes up so you can sell for a profit. It doesn't act as cash. Like, you don't buy cash, you don't buy euro or dollar to hope that it goes up in value and that you can sell it into something else like euro or whatever like that. You kind of just buy cash so you can use it. And we don't really see that with cryptos, but with Litecoin, I can kind of see that it's slowly not heading towards that way, but its value is stabilizing compared to other crypto assets. You know, the ones that aren't pegged to other assets like Tether's US dollar or Circle's US dollar. So it's one of the only cryptos that has kind of slowed down. Well, it's not one of the only ones, but it's one of the bigger cryptos that have sort of slowed down and started acting within a price range. Now, that price range is still pretty drastic. It's from, 40 euros to like below 300 euros, but it's still like, for a cryptocurrency, the volatility is much lower. The thing I want to focus on today's video is, again, sort of the halvings. I think we should be looking at this as much as possible before the halving actually takes place. And with Litecoin, we're lucky, we have a lot of data. So we have like literally 3 halvings here on this chart, but that's way more than most altcoins that we have. So we can definitely glean a lot from Litecoin here. And the first thing that I want to show you as well is that it might be obvious looking at it straight away, but we can see that these sort of halvings, we first of all see that these moves here, they grow longer as time goes on. So we can see that this one, this one only lasted, say, 200 days, just under a year. But if we see when we started this rally to the halving, it was about 420 days, give or take. If we take a look here and we see when the rally started from the low to the halving, we can see it was about 510 days. So it's increasing amount. And we can see that it's starting earlier. Obviously, it has to be starting earlier in the cycle for it to go on this long. If we take a look at roughly where it ended, it was about 140 days here, 120 days. So it's starting earlier and finishing maybe a bit later. So basically, this is increasing. And we can see here that currently, so far, what we have is, again, a very similar story. If we start from sort of this low here and bring it over, we can see about 700 days. But we've ended much earlier, really. If we take it from here, we can see that it's about 200 days that we finished, potentially. But I think we are still due a leg down for this. And the reason I'm just showing you this anyway is because it's important with the narrative of this video. And that's that basically Litecoin's cycles are not taking longer, but they are spread out longer. Whereas before we would see lots of extreme movements in short amounts of time. As the coin has gotten older, its volatility has slowed down, and we see things take longer to play out with Litecoin, whereas before they took less time. And another thing I want to focus on with this video is these pre-halving sell-offs and the pumps that come before them. So we see here back in 2016, Litecoin had a really strong pump of, 77%, which was, it's okay for Litecoin. It's pretty good. It had a way big one back here in the summer, but, most coins get a pump. Well, not most, but most did at this time that were around, had a big pump. We see Litecoin basically had this pump here. I want to prefix this straight away. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm assuming that this pump here, this rally, followed by this sell-off, is equivalent to this rally followed by this sell-off. And I know there are some key differences, like for example here, we only dropped down to where we were before the pump, and here we dropped down to lower than where we were before the pump. I would say that probably, this is also the COVID sell-off, that a lot of people say this wouldn't have happened if COVID didn't happen. We saw it happen the year before, the cycle before, with no real reason, to be honest with you. It was just, scares in the market that the halving was coming, inflation chopped down, Bitcoin's got to become more valuable for miners to make a profit. sort of this scary time for crypto. And same thing here. And like I said, this sell-off was coming whether we had COVID or not. I just think we probably would have, without COVID, maybe we would have just returned to the pre-pump lows. But anyway, I'm not getting into that. I'm assuming that this move here is equivalent to this move here. And also I'm sort of assuming that we will have another one this cycle. And again, it sort of takes place immediately after these orange moves, most of the time. Like you can see here that we have our rally, we have our downward trend afterwards, or we have an upward trend, we have a downward trend, and then we usually have our pump and then our sell-off. Here we had our upward move, our downward move, our pump, and then our sell-off. Here we've had our upward move. Again, I will say that as time has gone on, the angle at which these rallies go to has decreased. So like, the gains have gotten worse as time has gone on, but they've gone out longer, taken longer for less gains, basically. And then for this cycle, obviously, we've had our upward trend, a very quick downward trend. Potentially it might go on for longer. This line might not be accurate. I might need to do something like this later on, but I honestly don't think so. What we have noticed is that as the trends come lower, the decline comes harsher. So we saw here, this decline was much harsher than this, well, not much harsher, but it was harsher than this decline. So I'd say we could probably see a bit of a harsher decline here, basically. So we'll probably see something like this play out. And then we have our pump now that will probably take place, and it'll probably be much slower, maybe, I don't know. And then our sell-off. The first interesting piece of info about when this low might come in, so after our second pump, and then maybe a lower low or just another low will occur, I want to try base it off how close that is to the halving. So we can see here, if we zoom in, back with Litecoin's first sort of pre-halving sell-off, we saw it only took 16 days before the halving for the low to be in. And afterwards we put in even another low, but I'm sort of just taking this as this one move is independent of itself, and it put in the low 16 days before. If we come over to this new sort of, the second cycle, sorry if you excuse me, we have the pump, and then the low comes in 59 days before the halving. And again, this is going back to the things are taking longer and less is happening sort of narrative that I want to give to the video. We see it's taking longer for Litecoin to put in a low, and it's not, well, it is dropping more, but maybe that was COVID. Again, it's taking longer, basically. And we can sort of view this two ways when we want to calculate how long our next low or when it will be in. We can either look at this as a quadratic function or a linear function. And basically, a linear function means that the difference between two outputs is the same. So if we have 16 here, and then we have 43 here, that means we have a 27 difference between the two. Or sorry, no, a 43. There's a 43 move increase, so the next one will be another 43, and so on, 43, 43, 43, as the cycles go on. Or we can look at it as a quadratic function, which I think probably is more appropriate, where the difference is increasing. So for a quadratic function, for example, we'll use this one. Our first output is 16. Our second output is 43. So the increase here is 27 between on top of what we've added before. So if we go 16, if this was a linear function, it would go to 32 and then to 48. But because this could be a quadratic function, we're seeing 16 plus 16, but instead of just leaving it at plus 16, we add 27 to bring it to 43. So then we need to find the difference between the two, which equals to 11, and then we need to add that on top of our 27. So if this is losing you, it's okay. It's maybe something you might want to touch up on your own time, but I don't blame you if you don't. You might just want to trust me on this when I say that the next term out would be plus 81 days, basically. And we can see that I've drawn this over here, if we're to go with a quadratic function. And you can see, of course, that these moves are growing as time goes on. This is normal for a quadratic. And we can see that we are sort of closing in on this time frame that we're currently at now. In fact, if we check how many days we have left from where we currently are, we have about a month, give or take, until we reach sort of this plus however many days, 124, 160, 140 days, sorry. So this is 140 days out from the halving, and we have about a month and a half before we get there. Another thing that I would like to check to sort of reinforce this is the amount of days it usually takes for the peak to reach the low. So here we say it takes about a month. If we assume this is the peak and that we take about a month, we do this well before our 140 days. But assuming that, again, things are taking longer, we might want to allocate more time to that. So we can see we have around 52 days from the peak to the low, which would make sense. But if we take a check at here, how long it took for us to go from our peak to our low, we can see it was much quicker, much quicker. In fact, it was literally a week, basically. I'll say a week, even though it was 6 days. It was a week. So we went from a week to a month. Is it so hard to say that we maybe go to 2 months here? Or just under 2 months, as we can see that basically you're adding 3 weeks per cycle for how long it takes from the peak to go to the low. Again, this is assuming a lot of things. This is assuming that Litecoin will follow some sort of a pattern over time, and that the time-based pattern is increasing in length over its cycles. So again, we're seeing here that, you know, maybe if we had 3 weeks to 2 months, we get somewhere around 50 days, and that does kind of line up with our our quadratic assumption that, you know, this will take place sometime in the next 2 months. And again, it does kind of line up where we've seen Litecoin had, to be honest, a pitiful rally compared to all the other altcoins. It's gone up 30% when a lot of others have gone up much further. And again, you could call them safer bets because they're higher market cap, like, you know, Avalanche, Matic, Solana, XRP, Ethereum. They've all gone up much more than 30% over the last 2 months, or month, really, I'll say, just to be fair. But, you know, Litecoin, again, we do see this. It's a much more stable cryptocurrency. And I think that's why it gets a lot of hate. It's because its volatility is decreasing, so there's not as many gains to be made in this crypto, so people sort of ignore it. But it is a good crypto to sort of hold its value. Maybe it still does decrease quite a lot. Like if you want to check it from its bull run to its low, it still goes down 90% during bear markets. So it's kind of, you know, I have a dream for Litecoin, and you know, I'm trying to make it fit into that, to be honest with you. But that's sort of what I'm sort of gleaming from Litecoin, that we could see this low coming in around this sort of 140 days before the halving, if we're following this sort of quadratic function from days out from the halving. And we do have a lot of circumstantial evidence around this. Like we see that these time lengths are growing longer, and these sell-offs or these downward trends are becoming shorter, and we see that these moves are becoming less and less as they go on. Like we can see here that the peak for the first cycle, before, you know, the pump that we were looking at, came in pretty close to its high before that. You know, it was around $6 that Litecoin pumped up to before it had a sell-off, and its previous high to that was $9. So it was about 33% down from where, you know, 33% down from its previous high from where it pumped to. If we go to the next cycle, we can see that we're not going to get numbers like that. If we see a drop down from here, we see it's a 43% drop down. So again, it's not climbing as high for the pre-pump to the halving, to the pump prior to the halving. If we take a look here and assume this is it, we go from this high down to Litecoin, we do get about a 34% move. So maybe you might want to consider this in. Maybe this is just one of those moves where it's not logarithmic, it doesn't really change from cycle to cycle, it's just somewhere from a range between 30 and 40. And this would line up for that. But again, it's a lot of sort of ifs and only if and but this sort of narratives. But this is what I would think is most likely to play out over the next few months anyway. So not bullish on Litecoin at the moment. And if we take a look at what happens to Litecoin before these times, we see it usually comes down not to its low here. We often see like a low in Christmas time or whatever. Like we kind of got that in 2022 sort of thing here, similar one here, but again it was higher up. Again, this diminishing volatility, we can see that it's sort of closing in, the range isn't as wide, and it didn't come down to that low, but it sort of did, to be honest with you. Again, like it kind of depends if you want to exclude this low here because of COVID and just say it came down to here. I would consider that acceptable. So in that case, you're looking at Litecoin coming down to somewhere around the $60 mark, somewhere around the 60, I would say $60 to $62 is where you could see Litecoin go. If you're following this narrative of that it pumps up and it comes down to where it was before the pump instead of lower, because a lot of people blame this lower here for COVID. But even though we had basically the same move here where we came down to our lows before the pump instead of going lower like we did with the COVID cycle. So again, kind of what you want to take from that. I would probably price in some move between the two. I would say maybe we drop down below these moves, but not by much. You know, maybe we wick below 60. I don't know. It's kind of impossible to call these things as well. I feel like it's much easier to follow moves over time than trying to price in a low at a specific price range. So I would say we're going to see downward movements at this 140-day mark. Now, before I take a look at Litecoin on its Bitcoin pair, I do want to thank today's sponsor, FairDesk. Now, FairDesk is an exchange, and if you're interested, you can click the link in the description for a 5% deposit bonus. With no KYC required, you can start trading straight away, and Litecoin is on FairDesk, so if you want to go pick some up, why not do it there with the 5% deposit bonus? Anyway, into Litecoin on its Bitcoin pair, we see we have this annoying wick down, which sort of makes the graph a lot more annoying to read. We can see I want to take a bit of a different approach to this. I want to sort of see how Litecoin has performed from cycle to cycle, and we can see that on its Bitcoin pair, Litecoin has gone down. So what we saw the last two cycles, the difference between the two previous cycles was that Litecoin put in a high and it put in a low during that cycle, and then the next cycle its high was 50% lower than its previous high, and its low was about 50% lower as well. So we can see basically the whole coin shifted its highs and lows about 50%. And now I'm excluding this huge sell-off here because I don't know what caused it, but it was obviously some big whale selling. I couldn't tell you. But you know, we see Litecoin again puts in its low. This time it puts in its low much earlier in the cycle, and it puts in more highs. You can see it puts in its low earlier, it puts in its highs earlier, and then it continues to put in more highs. So a much more bullish cycle for Litecoin here, and maybe we can expect more like that. And again, what we've currently had so far, again, is different, more similar to sort of this move where we have our high first and then our low. So we have our high first and then our low here. And then we sort of have a rally up, and now we've come back down into this low sort of zone on its BTC pair. We can see we sort of saw this as we got closer to the halving, but it didn't touch the bottom until the very end of the year. It basically closed the year at a low. And we might see something similar play out here. Again, like going back to the less moves over a longer time frame for Litecoin, or similar moves over a longer time frame, we might see that Litecoin just slowly trickles down to this point here. Maybe it puts in its low now, or a little bit later on, and then it sort of starts climbing into the rally. But you know, historically, like even after the rally, Litecoin either does nothing, you know, and eventually goes down a bit on its Bitcoin pair, or it just goes straight down on its Bitcoin pair. So after the halving, I wouldn't be too bullish on what to expect from Litecoin. And again, then, like again, I forgot to also show you what happened with this the previous cycle compared to our current cycle on the moves that have taken place. We see that like our highs here were 70%, well, sorry, our highs this cycle so far have been 70% lower than the highs in the previous cycle. And the lows so far, again, there is a chance that we put in a lower low here, have been 40% lower from the previous lows. So again, this pattern doesn't really add up. We have a minus 50, minus 50, and then we have a minus 70, minus 40. We could be looking at maybe this might push down lower, and our low might go to bring this down to a 50%. If this does come down to a 50%, we could see it go to 1,500 Satoshis. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. You know, I don't think it would be the craziest thing to assume that, but it could happen. But never count your eggs until they've hatched, you know. I would be sort of pricing in this as our low, but again, Litecoin hasn't shown to be very strong, to be honest with you, on its BTC or its USD pair. Like, if you look, like, zoom out on Litecoin, we can see it's just gone down, basically. Ultimately, the whole thing has just been lower high after lower high. And in fact, if you want to sort of put a line here, down through this way, like, it's been kind of rough for Litecoin, to be honest with you. Now, this line isn't the best thing on the planet, but it sort of gets a mean, not a mean, a median of these highs, especially this cycle. It's not great, basically. It's just been in a lower trend, more or less, over the cycles. So to assume that, you know, this is our high for this cycle, I think you would probably be correct. But again, we just have to wait and see. There isn't much time left for Litecoin to pump. And historically, during this time, Litecoin only goes down on its Bitcoin pair. We can see here as well, what's interesting is that Litecoin basically goes down for the last, like, you know, year before the halving, and then for the next year-ish after the halving on its Bitcoin pair. And if we take a look here for a similar thing, we see that, basically. Now, again, the degree at which it's been going down from these points is not as harsh. We can see here we probably moved much more of a percentage lower, minus 78%. If we take a look here, minus 65%. So again, we're not going, our rate at which we are dropping is decreasing, but we're still going down. So to assume something like that, maybe you want to say we drop 50% down from this guy here, and we'll say, I'll try to be as accurate as possible with it. We'll go for a year out, roughly, on the Litecoin pair. You see, like, that's looking very bearish, to be honest with you. I'll be nice and take this line up here. We can maybe see that, what's this going to look like? This would be a 65% drop. So, like, again, not great, but there's no way, you know, there's no reason to believe that, well, there is a reason to believe it, but there's no, like, confirmation that will play out, and it's, you know, it's not a likely thing, potentially. Like, that's just me pulling up a line. Again, it could be one of these moves that's like an average. We see a 50% we see a 70% here, we see a 60% here, maybe we see a 65% here. Like, you know, some of these things are very hard to call, you know, before they've happened. And especially once you don't have much data. Like, realistically, cryptocurrency, we don't have much data. And Litecoin is one of the cryptos that we have the most data for, excluding Bitcoin. So, you know, again, kind of take what you will from this. I'm just hoping that you watch this video, you understand more about Litecoin's seasonality during its cycles, and you can make an educated decision based off of that. But I think that about wraps up this video. Again, a quick TLDR, basically, I believe currently that we're in a quadratic equation for when the lows are put in before the halving. I think this lines up because we can see that these sort of moves are shrinking, and also their volatility. Sorry, these moves are growing in length but shrinking in volatility. So we don't get these huge rallies up and these huge sell-offs as harshly as we have done as cycles have gone on. And as cycles have gone on, these lows that we've consistently had over the cycles have grown further away from the halving date. So basically, I'm pulling from this that we will have a low. It mightn't be as low of a move as we usually get, because again, volatility is shrinking, and I think it will be somewhere around the 140 days out from the halving. If you liked the video, guys, please like, subscribe, comment down below where you think Litecoin's going. Hope you guys are well, take care, and peace.